Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah bil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala muhammadin bil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd. The topic for today is a topic that is very dear to my heart. And it's a topic that I feel is extremely important to all of us. And as we will learn from the verses of the Holy Quran and from the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and from the sayings of the pious, we will learn today, inshallah, we will learn more about the importance of this topic. And as we've been hearing from last night and throughout the day today, the theme is how to revive our faith, how to rejuvenate our faith, how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through various avenues and through various channels. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah in Riyadh al-Salihin, one of the most accepted books in the world, he has a chapter entitled Babu Kasrati Turuq al-Khair, a chapter on the multiple ways of doing good. And the scholars discuss that there are multiple ways to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There isn't just one way, there isn't one universal, standard, set way, but there are multiple ways to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And today we will discuss how to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to revive one's faith through halal consumption and by watching what we eat. The scholars explain as an introduction or as a fundamental point or principle that there are two related aspects here. We discuss halal food, and we also discuss the importance of eating halal food. We should also bear in mind that just as important is earning a halal income as well. These two go hand in hand. So when we talk about putting halal into our body and avoiding putting haram into our body, both these aspects go on hand in hand. A person can eat the most halal food in the world, but if their income is haram and they're using haram money to buy that halal food, then they're still putting haram into their system. So that's why we need to ensure both our income is halal and the food that we eat is halal as well. The two go hand in hand. And often we only focus on the food aspect of it and we forget the income aspect. So keep in mind, throughout today's lecture, both are applicable. The people of the past and the Sahaba anhum, and the pious people before us, they explained to us this strong connection between what we eat and spirituality, getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they argue that the key to spirituality is eating halal. So we tend to look at spirituality as staying in the masjid all day. We tend to look at spirituality as praying salat for 5 hours. Respected friends, we also need to understand there's a step before that. And that step has to do with what we eat. So the key to spirituality, the key to getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in reality connected to the food that we eat. One of the pious people before us, Imam Ghazali, mentions this in his Ihya Ulumuddin. Inshallah, this is a book I highly recommend we all read from. Inshallah, I'll be quoting it throughout today's lecture. Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, wrote his magnus opus, his greatest book, Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the Islamic sciences. And he covered all aspects of Islam. And one of the more important sections is halal and haram. Eating halal food and halal income, and avoiding haram food and unlawful food and unlawful incomes. So Imam Ghazali has written extensively on this topic. In fact, this entire 300 pages is on halal and haram. This entire 300 pages just on halal and haram. So one of the pious people before us, his name is Ibrahim ibn Adham. He has some very famous stories. He was a king and he left it all and he went on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very interesting story, very interesting life as well. So one day he said, "Lam yanbul indana man nabala bil hajj wal jihad wa innama nabala indana man nabala man kana yaqil ma dakhla jawfa." So Ibrahim ibn Adham explains, he says, in the circle of pious people, awliya Allah, he says that those people who attained, those people who reached the objective, who reached Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they did not get there by acts of worship, such as Hajj, or such as jihad, or striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was not the key for them to get there. And we can also explain that was not the primary means for them to get there. Yes, of course, Hajj is a great act of worship, jihad is a great act of worship, but we can explain it in this way. This was not the primary means for them to attain and get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, all those who attained, innama nabala man nabal. Nabil, as we know the word comes from, becoming noble, gaining honor, and in this context, becoming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, the only way the people before us were able to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, were able to attain, were able to become awliya Allah, the only way was by observing what went into their stomachs, by being conscious, and by observing what went in their stomachs. So, respected friends, this is to draw our attention to these important decisions that we make on a daily basis. I feel like eating a candy bar. Let me just go to the store, randomly pick with my eyes closed, take it and eat it and put it in my mouth. I feel like some coffee. Let me just look on DoorDash, pick XYZ thing, order it, and just drink it. I feel like putting on some lip balm. Let me just go to the store, pick anything, and that's it. So the point is, on a daily basis, we make tens, if not hundreds of decisions. What cereal do I eat for breakfast? What type of yogurt do I eat for brunch? What type of sandwich do I eat for lunch? And so on. So the point is, the people before us, they would pay attention and pay close attention to what they ate. And that was, according to Ibrahim ibn Adham, that was the secret to their piety. That was the key to the road to spirituality. And that was what opened the doors for them. Another important quotation, Sahal ibn Tustari, also a very pious individual, he explained it in a different way. He writes, Man akala al-haram asat jawarihum sha aw aba alima aw lam ta'lam. So he explains this link between what we eat and spirituality. So he explains, he says, that individual who eats unlawful food, his body will disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether he wants it to or he doesn't want it to. Whether he knows about it or he doesn't know about it. The fact of the matter is, the fact that he ate unlawful food, just by him eating unlawful food, his body will disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not in his control. His body will disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a natural consequence of him eating unlawful food. His body will not want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His body will not want to come to the masjid. His body or her body will not want to read the Quran. Their body will not want to come to a spiritual environment. Their body will not enjoy worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise, on the flip side, he writes, وَمَنْ كَانَتْ طَعْمُهُ حَلَالًا أَطَاعَتْهُ جَوَارِحُهُ وَوُفِّقَتْ الْخَيْرَاتِ. So he explains, that individual who eats lawful food, his or her limbs will obey them. His or her limbs will obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that person will be guided towards good. So respected friends, this is a very crucial matter. And this is a very serious matter. I would argue, we look at other matters, this is a matter of life or death. This is a person's spirituality here. This is a person's hereafter. This is a person's life. These decisions that we make on a daily basis, we need to realize the consequence and the impact it's having. Respected friends, if the reality hit, if our eyes opened up and the true reality of this opened up to us, we would be different. And our food choices would also be different. And our lives would also be different. Friends, the fact of the matter is, a good percentage, if not majority of Muslims in America do not eat halal. This is the reality. You'll see people saying, I keep halal when I'm at home, I don't keep halal when I'm traveling. I do my best when I'm traveling, I take the fatwa of Ahl Kitab and I just eat at McDonald's. But friends, a good percentage of Muslims are not eating halal. Just at a basic level. We are not careful of what we eat. And we are openly eating haram without understanding the consequences, without understanding the impact of our actions. So there are numerous consequences and effects of what we eat. And one of the most important ones, along with the spiritual aspect, is du'as. The prerequisite and condition for du'as being accepted and answered is that we eat halal. A person that eats haram, their du'as will not be answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a fact. And a person who wants all their du'as to be answered, they need to start by eating halal. So there are numerous aspects of eating halal. Today, we are focusing on the spiritual element, but there are numerous other aspects to examine as well. And respected friends, keep in mind, Islam teaches us a balance. Al-Iman bayn al-khawf wa raja. There is a balance here. The goal is not to scare people, but the goal is also to motivate people as well. Right? We need a little bit of both. So that's why we need to look at both sides of the coin. That person who eats halal and is strict about eating halal, they will also see numerous benefits and advantages. They will see numerous spiritual advantages and spiritual effects of eating halal. And I'll share a few with you today. On the flip side, there's also consequences of eating haram, which include your good deeds not being accepted for 40 days. That person who eats haram, this effect is not just a one-time thing. It doesn't go away just like that. The effect lasts for 40 days. Think about this. The effect of eating haram lasts for 40 days. As mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad in Targhib wa Tarhib, in other books of hadith. So think about this. It's just a small thing. I decided to go eat out. My friends offered me something. I didn't want to say no. It was haram. It's end of story. It's not a big deal. Move on. Friends, it doesn't work like that. 40 days, that impact of what we eat has effect on us. 40 days. 40 days of salat, 40 days of worship will not be accepted. We will not get the reward for it. Friends, it's a matter of this reality sinking in and this reality hitting. We mentioned this. If we had true faith and conviction, and if we had the true reality of this, no Muslim would ever eat haram. No Muslim would even dare to eat haram, respected friends. But the yaqeen, the reality of this has to sink in. So let us hear the story and advantages of eating halal as well. In the history of the Darul Deoband, the famous and world famous Islamic madrasa and Darul in India, there was a famous individual known as the grass saint. The grass saint. The Ghas ka wali, grass saint. Who was this individual, respected friends? He was a regular worker. Very interesting story recorded in the early history of Darul Deoband. So this individual was a simple man, what we refer to as a laborer, right? As a blue-collar job, just a worker. And every day he would go out to the forest, he would gather grass, then he would go back to the marketplace and sell that grass. And they mentioned about him, in one day, he would earn 6 rupees. Keep in mind, this is many years ago. Since then, we've had inflation. 6 rupees was worth a great amount, was a decent amount at that time. So from the 6 rupees, he would give 2 rupees to his own expenses. 2 rupees he would give to his family members who were in need. And then the remaining 2 rupees, he would save and he would gather that money to feed the great ulama of the time, including Hujjat al-Islam, al-Maqasim Nanotwi, including Maulana Mahmud al-Hasan, and including Maulana Yaqub, the teacher of Maulana Shafiq Khanvi, the great ulama of Deoband. So 2 rupees, 1/3 of his income, he would save and keep it in place. Finally, when he would have 14 rupees, he would go and buy coarse rice. And you guys have heard about basmati, you've heard of the high quality rice. This is a low quality rice. Then you take that rice and mix it with molasses. Because we're not talking about biryani here. We're not talking about damka biryani. We're not talking about kabuli pulao. We're talking about molasses and coarse rice. And then he would invite all the great ulama of Deoband to come and eat. But friends, what is going on here? The great ulama of Deoband, right? They said, we used to wait and anticipate the day this poor man would feed us. But friends, what's going on? At that time, the great ulama were being invited by all the rich people of India. Come over and eat at our house. We'll give you a 5-course meal. We'll give you a 10-course meal. They would decline. But when this poor laborer would offer them and would invite them, they would wait and they would anticipate that invitation. And what was the food again, you guys? Wagyu steak? No. Coarse rice along with molasses. They used to say, when we ate his food, we would feel the spirituality for days. That food was so spiritual. We would feel it in our salat for days. We would feel it in our awakened awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our realization that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. That food had an effect on us. And we look forward to that meal because of that reason. So, respected friends, it's important that we understand this works both ways. This works both ways. And just as there are great harms in eating haram, that's another way, haram, harm. Haram, H-A-R-A-M, harm, H-A-R-M. There are great harms in eating haram. But likewise, there are great benefits to eating halal as well. And there are great spiritual benefits in eating halal as well. Next, respected friends, let us learn about a beautiful concept and teaching of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ related to halal food consumption and related to earning income as well. This is a very beautiful concept as well, and it's also a very important concept in Islam. This should be a household name, it should be a household word, and every Muslim should know about this term. Right? Just as we hear about tawakkul, we hear about yaqeen, we hear about zuhud, we hear about these words, likewise, just as equal and just as important is the word wara. Wara. So if you haven't heard this before, learn this word. Wara. Wara can be defined as piety. Wara can be defined as taking extra concern and taking extra care to avoid haram and unlawful food. So wara is a very important concept. In fact, many of the great scholars of Islam wrote entire books just on wara and the concept of wara. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, Ibn Abi Dunya, and others. They wrote entire books just on this topic. And now let us learn more about this concept and how it works. And how it is another means of getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the authentic hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, فَضْلُ الْعِلْمِ خَيْرٌ مِنْ فَضْلِ الْعِبَادَةِ وَخَيْرُ دِينِكُمْ الْوَرَى. Friends, this one hadith should suffice for us to realize how important wara and avoiding haram is. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in authentic hadith recorded in Tabrani, the virtue of knowledge, and you, as we are gathering here to learn, the virtue of knowledge is greater than the virtue of worship. Seeking knowledge, asking a question, learning is more virtuous than worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and optional worship. And the best part of your religion is wara. The best quality of your religion is wara. So this gives us an idea how important this concept of wara is. And let us learn more on how this works. And let us learn more about how to apply wara in our lives. And how to practically implement these teachings in our day-to-day interactions, in our day-to-day food choices. So the next hadith which I will share with you is an extremely important hadith. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, in his great collection of 40 hadith known as al-Arba'in an-Nawawiyyah, perhaps the greatest selection and collection of 40 hadith that any scholar has ever written. Arba'in an-Nawawiyyah. Imam Tamim, Sheikh Tamim was also doing a class on this. I'm not sure if it's completed yet or not, but on Saturday nights he was also teaching Arba'in an-Nawawiyyah. So in this collection, Imam Nawawi gathered the most important hadith of all of Islam, summarizing all of Islam into 40 hadith. And from those 40, the hadith which I am about to read is also included. And surprise, surprise, it has to do with halal consumption and also has to do with wara as well. And inshallah, you will also see usage of this hula hoop as well, inshallah. You understand why I bought the hula hoop. And I might show you guys a demonstration, inshallah. So I'm not sure, with the video recording, I might have to pause for a second. We might do a practical demonstration, inshallah. عن النعمان بن بشير رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الحلال بين والحرام بين وبينهما مشتبهات لا يعلمون كثير من الناس. So this is an authentic hadith that's recorded both in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And in a beautiful way, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given us a practical example of wara and how it works. Sometimes we need real life examples, sometimes we need case studies for a concept to hit home. So in this hadith, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, those matters and those foods which are lawful are clear. The halal aspects are clear. You guys, is water halal? Yes, water is halal. Okay, this is a clear-cut matter. Well, haram bayyinun. And likewise, the unlawful matters, they're also clear-cut. They're also very clear. Is pork halal, you guys? I don't have a pork sandwich to show you guys. Is pork halal? No, it's not. It's haram. Okay? That's clear-cut. وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبَهَاتٌ وَبَيْنَهُمَا مُشْتَبَهَاتٌ. And there's a level between the halal things and between the haram things. There's a gray area. مشتبهات. There is a gray area. لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. Many individuals are not aware of this. Many people don't understand how they work. So understand these three categories. We have the clear-cut halal, we have the clear-cut haram, and we have a gray area in between. So understand these three zones. And this gray area is the key here, friends. And this gray area is the key to wara. It's the key to avoiding haram and unlawful foods. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ then explains, فَمَنِ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ فَمَنِ اسْتَبْرَأَ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ وَعِرْضِهِ. So he explains that person who also avoids the haram and avoids the gray area as well. That individual has protected his religion and his honor. That individual is safe. But وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي الشُّبَهَاتِ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ فِي الْحَرَامِ. That person who messes around, who experiments, who dilly-dallies, who ventures into the doubtful matters, the gray area. At some point, that person for sure will go into haram as well. Friends, this is the example that the Prophet Muhammad gave. That the doubtful matters, it's best to avoid them as well. And make them a buffer zone between you and the haram. So, halal is there, eat only halal, but this gray area, avoid that as well, because if you avoid the gray area, you also automatically avoid haram as well. Okay. Then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gives an example for us to relate to. And here I will give a practical demonstration of these three levels here: halal, haram, and the gray area, the doubtful matters. Right? So we have our props to show us here as well. We have our props to show us. So let's understand this to be haram. Right? If you fall in here, you die. Right? Let's make it more dramatic. You fall in here, you die. Now, this area, this larger area, this is the doubtful matters. And you can understand here what happens with the doubtful matters and what happens with the gray area. So, let us go on with the hadith. Karai akhul al-hima. Prophet Muhammad gave the example. It's like a shepherd. A shepherd who has his goats, and his goats need food, they need fodder, and they need grass to eat on. So what happens? The king, he has his private land. No trespassing. If you go into the king's private area, you'll get executed, you'll die. There's a chain link fence, it's electrocuted. If you go on that fence, you die. In the same way, the Prophet Muhammad has given us this example that we can relate to. That this shepherd has a choice. How close does he want to go? Is that shepherd willing to play with fire? He can be 2 feet away from the king's private area, or he can be 200 feet away, or he can be 2 miles away. The closer the shepherd brings his flock to the king's private area, the more the chances are his shepherd will trespass and go in the king's private area. The closer he goes, the more he's playing with fire. Then the Prophet Muhammad explains, just as every king has his off limits and has his private area, in the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has his protected area, his sacred area. And those are the things which he made a haram. So let this example sink in and let the lesson come forward here, respected friends. So what does this mean? It means any intelligent person, to avoid the haram, to avoid the consequences of one morsel of haram food going into the system, that person needs to play it safe. That person needs to keep their distance. And let us take a look here. Hopefully this is portable. We explained you have a choice here. The black ring here is death. It's a ring of death. And this area here is the area of doubtfulness. So if I play a game and I decide to run over this, everything you can see here, guys. I fall in the black ring, I die. So the intelligent person is going to walk around. And the person who wants to play with fire, right, they will jump, they'll do blind jumps, they'll do tricks, but the moment they fall in, game over, they're dead. Friends, that's the same example we're looking at here. Do not go close to the hula hoop. Do not go close to the doubtful things. Use the doubtful things as a buffer zone. Right? Yes. Am I doing something wrong here, you guys? Maybe technically not. Right? The doubtful area, it could be halal, it could be haram. But any intelligent person, they're not going to mess around with it. It's not worth the risk. Right? Keep your distance. Don't even go close to the hula hoop. Walk around the hula hoop. And walk around the thing. Right? You don't want to die. You don't want a spiritual death. So, respected friends, this is the example that the Prophet Muhammad has given us. And then the Prophet Muhammad goes on to say, and this is a very relevant tie-in to us and to our bodies. Ala inna fil jasad la mudghah. إذا صلحت صلحت الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام رواه البخاري ومسلم في صحيحهما. Then the Prophet Muhammad tells us, listen, there's a part of your body that when this part of the body is correct, the rest of the body will also be correct as well. And once this part of the body is corrupted, the rest of the body will also be corrupted. And this is a person's heart. So respect friends, everything that we do and everything that we eat has an impact on this heart. Whether we like it or not, if we eat halal, it's going to have an impact on our heart. If we eat haram, it's going to have an impact on our hearts. So beware of what you put in your hearts. And beware of what you put in your bodies. So next, respected friends, let's practically apply this. How does this concept of wara work? And how do we apply it? And what does it mean? In another authentic hadith, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is reported to have said, لا يبلغ العبد أن يكون من المتقين حتى يذر ما لا بأس به حذرا مما به بأس. So this is another way of looking at it. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, a person cannot reach the level of taqwa and piety unless they leave out those things which are harmless, which technically are not haram, which technically are permissible, out of the fear that they might fall into something which is haram and unlawful. Again, respected friends, this means that we have some extra work to do. We need to err on the side of caution. Again, with the same example which I've given. And I will give some more practical examples as well. The haram part and the killer part is the black area. That's the black area. But there might be many lawful things and doubtful but lawful things that I need to avoid just to keep me away from haram. And let me give you guys a practical example. This is relevant to all of us, especially growing up in this country, especially seeing how easy fast food is, and especially watching our friends and the people around us. One of my good friends used to share this with me. He said every day when I was young, we would go to Taco Bell. He said we'd go there. And we'd order a burrito. And we'd make dua, Ya Allah, please make sure in our vegetarian burrito there isn't a piece of meat. Friends, the risk of eating at partial halal restaurants, or restaurants which also sell pork, or restaurants which also sell non-halal meat, or restaurants which also have alcohol. Respect friends, convenience. Look around us. How many fast food restaurants are within 5 minutes of here? We see all our friends going in and out. We see the lines there. We see all our friends going to Smash Burger or XYZ place. So this is a clear example. Those products technically sold at some of these fast food places, the vegetarian products, are they technically halal? Yes, there's a good chance they're technically halal, but they fall in a gray area. They might be cooked with the same oil that they cook the beef burgers with. They might be cut up on the same plate or on the same counter as the non-halal products. Things happen. I'm sure many of you guys can share horror stories. Your salsa has a piece of meat inside of it. Your cheese pizza has a piece of pepperoni inside of it. And so on. But friends, these risks are there. And just like the example I gave, you play around with fire, you're going to get burned. At some point, you're going to get burned. You mess around with non-halal restaurants, at some point, you're going to get burned. It happens to the best of us. Someone mentioned the story to me. They walked in to a burrito place, a famous burrito place in America. They ordered their vegetarian burrito. At the counter, the worker mixed up the vegetarian burrito with the carne asada burrito. This happened. A close friend of mine, happened to them directly. They came home, they took a bite. It's a meat burrito. Another person went to Shake Shack. They ordered a mushroom burger. They got it, and without realizing it, it's a beef burger. They got to switch over. The orders got switched. Friends, these are real life examples. From a technical point of view, those vegetarian products at these fast food restaurants, they might be halal. But, respected friends, what is the objective here? To reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the objective here? To avoid haram and to avoid all the spiritual dangers of eating haram. So what does that mean? If we need to avoid and make a decision to avoid all these partial halal fast food outlets. Yeah, same thing with pizza, you guys. You ask the person, XYZ, halal, 100% halal certified pizza place, it's too expensive. Little Caesar is much cheaper, bro. You guys, 2 pizzas for $8. But are we willing to pay that, make that risk, you guys? Are we willing to take that risk and play with fire? And there are other examples of this as well. This is probably the most clear and most important example for all of us. So let us hear a real life example from one of the greatest companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that lived. Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu. Friends, so let us put ourselves in his shoes. And let us try to understand why he did what he did. Again, the authentic hadith mentions Sahih al-Bukhari. One day, Abu Bakr Siddiq had a slave, a servant, who used to work for him. So what does this mean? The servant would go and earn money, would come back, and he would give the earnings to Abu Bakr Siddiq as his boss. So one day, this person brings some food to Abu Bakr Siddiq, and he starts eating that food. Then the servant and slave asks, "Oh, Abu Bakr, aren't you going to ask me where I got this food from?" He said, "Where do you get this food from?" He said, "Oh, before I was Muslim, I used to fortune tell, and I used to deceive these people. I used to pretend like I knew the future, and I used to take money from these people. And these people still owed me some money, and they brought me this food, and this is that food." So what happens next, respected friends? Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu puts his finger in his throat and starts throwing up. He puts his finger inside his throat. Immediately, he starts throwing up. He wants to get that haram out of the system, respected friends. Because he realizes the impact of eating haram. The reality is there. He understands how serious it is. And out of his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he puts his finger inside of his throat. He starts throwing up and trying to get the food out of his system. So this was the way of the people before us. Now, are we required to do the same thing? Perhaps not. If something like this happens, someone lies to us, or we accidentally eat haram, do we have to throw up and do the same thing? No. But the point is, it's a thought behind it, respected friends. It's a thought behind it that counts. And it's a concern the Sahaba radhiyallahu had. And the worry they had that no haram should go through their system. No haram should come in, should enter inside their body. So keep in mind, respected friends, that to apply the concepts of wara and avoiding doubtful things, it's important that we do so under the supervision of the ulama, under the supervision of the mashayikh, and we don't apply our own understanding and teachings. But friends, I can imagine right now, as Sheikh Tamim also points out, sometimes people become super Sufis. And they want to develop a level of taqwa and piety, which even goes beyond the Sunnah teachings. They become a Superman, a super Sufi. So this doesn't mean we go home today after this lecture and we tell our wives and our children, throw out all the food in the house. From now on, we're going to cook our own food, everything. We're going to cook our own, we're going to make our own cereal. We're going to make our own bread. We're going to make our own soft drinks. Throw everything out. We're going to do everything from scratch. Friends, that's not what Islam is requiring from us. A balance is really important. And that's why Imam Ghazali speaks about the dangers of misapplying things and overdoing things and taking an excess. That a person thinks what they're doing is good, but in reality, they're hurting themselves. So unfounded suspicion and overdoing things and making our lives difficult for no reason and doing something which is unsustainable. So that's why there's different levels. And we need to ensure that what we are applying is a correct way of doing so, and it's not something which is extreme and which is not required. So for example, I just gave the example, buying nothing from the supermarkets. Yes, that's super Sufi. That's overdoing it. Okay? Yes. Choosing to eat at halal-only restaurants or restaurants which are 100% halal, yes, that's a valid application. And that's a relevant way to apply taqwa, wara, and caution to our lives. So whatever we do it in the proper supervision. Just like they say with doctors, the information that has been given, it's not medical advice. Consult with your doctor before you apply it. So the same thing applies to wara and adopting extra caution into your lives. And Imam Ghazali also explains there are different levels of wara and taqwa. Friends, I recommend reading through this book. There's about 50 pages on wara. There's about 50 pages analyzing, discussing, explaining what wara is and how it is applied. I recommend reading through the book, and inshallah, I recommend getting a deeper understanding. So keep in mind, wara is a higher level. Let us first start with eating halal, respected friends. Right? That's the first step. Ensuring that every single Muslim, every single father, every single mother, every single child eats only halal. That is the first step. And beyond that, there are different levels. As I said, there are higher levels of wara, there are higher levels of taqwa. I'll share with you a few stories, inshallah, and then we'll end, inshallah. I remember approximately 10 years ago, I visited Seattle. And I met a model Muslim youth, someone who I would describe as an example and model Muslim youth living in America. The individual was maybe about 22 years old, married, mashallah, 22-year-old married, pharmacist with an excellent job. He came up to me and he said, Sheikh, please advise me on how I can serve Islam. What can I do for Islam? And I'm looking at this kid, mashallah, motivated, full beard, wearing a thobe, pharmacist, mature, 22 years old. And I'm talking to him. I'm like, I was blown away. I said, mashallah, this is a model, an example of Muslim youth at 22 years old. So I started talking to him, find out more about his family. Then it came out. He said, from a young age, the only meat that I've eaten is that which my father slaughtered himself. From a young age, the only meat that I've had is that which my father has cut himself. I told him, I said, that's why you are who you are. And that's why you became who you became. That's the secret there, my friends. Now, is that practical for everyone? Right? You'll still find some people. Are there any people here in the gathering that slaughter their own meat, inshallah? Anyone? Yeah. Depending on the gathering, there might be 4 or 5 people that say so. Yeah. There's still, mashallah, there's still people who go up to the ranch every month or so, they slaughter their own meat. Now, is it required or is it mandatory that you slaughter your own meat, you guys? Can you eat something that's slaughtered by someone else? Yes, it's permissible. But again, these are different levels of taqwa. These are different levels of piety. And make sure if you're going to follow this, you do so in a sustainable way. And you do so under the supervision of the scholars. And as a whole, respected friends, as a whole, we need to create that buffer zone. We need that protection from haram, respected friends, and avoid the risks. I remember I met another brother in Denver, Colorado. Very nice brother, mashallah, very motivated brother. So he told me this from his own personal experience. Mashallah, he said, I have a habit, I read tahajjud every single night. He says, the day I eat out at a restaurant, we're not talking about haram restaurants here, you guys. This is just eating out in general. Whatever, Long John Silver, whatever fast food place, whatever it is. So we're not talking about eating haram food here, you guys. He says, whenever I'm in a situation, I decide to eat out, he said, I see the effect immediately the following night. I cannot wake up for tahajjud. I'm not able to wake up the next night. We're not talking about eating haram. We're talking about the consequences of even doubtful food. We're talking about that gray area here. The impact of the gray area. And the effects of eating haram food. So to summarize everything, respected friends, let us understand that another great way to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the route of eating halal food. This is a great way to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many of the pious people before us have told us that this is the way that they got there. This is the way that they attained. And to recap, an important attribute and quality in Islam is known as wara. Now, we should learn this word just as we know the word taqwa, just as we know the word tawakkul, yaqeen. We also need to know this word wara. Wara means you avoid the doubtful things to protect you from the haram things. You avoid the doubtful things to serve as a buffer zone between you and the haram, so you go nowhere near haram. And we have learned this is a great act of worship. Done correctly, under the supervision of the ulama, this is a great way to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, we will end today's lecture, and very interesting dua taught to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We will end with this dua, which reiterates everything which I've said and which emphasizes the importance of eating halal and earning halal as well. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us this dua. And very interesting, this is also the dua to read if you're in debt. This is also the dua to read, taught to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for those individuals who are in debt. And as many Sahaba explained, we started reading this dua, within a short period of time, Allah Ta'ala took care of all our debts. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us to read and say the following. Allahumma ikfini bihalalika an haramik. O Allah, make the halal sufficient for me, so that I don't need to go towards haram. Make halal enough for me, within the halal options available to me. Make them enough for me, so I don't go anywhere near haram. وَأَغْنِنَا بِفَضْلِكَ عَمَّنْ سِوَاكَ. And oh Allah, make me financially independent. Make me independent of everyone in the world besides you. Make me independent of all of creation and everyone besides you. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the reality and understanding of the importance of eating haram, of the importance of eating halal. That He gives us the reality and understanding of why it is so important to eat halal and lawful foods. And that He gives us an understanding and reality of the harms and dangers of eating haram and unlawful food. And that likewise, He gives us the ability to avoid the doubtful matters as well. Just to stay safe and to protect our religion He gives us all the ability, our families, our children, and our relatives, that we, not only do we avoid the haram and unlawful matters, we also avoid the doubtful things as well. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.